Iran's supreme leader. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said Israel's made a huge mistake in attacking his country and will be punished. He also warned Donald Trump that any US strike on Iran would have serious, irreparable consequences. Well, let's reflect on that now with Christopher de Bellaigue, who was for many years a correspondent in Iran and the author of several acclaimed books about the country. Welcome to you, Christopher.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. How did you interpret the threats made by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in his statement this morning?
They were to be expected. I think as soon as Trump, he came out the other night and said he told the people of Tehran that they needed to evacuate immediately, which caused a considerable amount of alarm and panic. And then he called yesterday for what he terms unconditional surrender. But we don't exactly know what that means. And it now seems that America is looking for an excuse to weigh in alongside their Israeli allies and perhaps deploy a bunker-busting bomb that will take out the facility at Fordo, which is the facility that the Israelis cannot get to because they don't have the ordnance or they don't have the aeroplane that can drop that bomb. So Khamenei is showing that he's still alive. There are rumors going around Iran that he was killed. He's demonstrated that, and he's also demonstrated that he is going to go down fighting if indeed it comes to that. We all know that this is a terribly one-sided war in military terms. The Iranians are fantastically outgunned. They have a few things up their sleeve that they can still deploy. They can cause disruption. They could attack American interests on the other side of the Persian Gulf, but that would bring Trump down very heavily on them. So actually, I think the Iranian options are quite limited. And what Khamenei is doing is trying to play for time and trying to see what happens. I think possibly what he would like is a let up in the Israeli attack and then an opportunity to sit down and actually examine what that unconditional surrender might mean. But it's becoming extremely difficult to be in Khamenei's position right now.
Well, and as you say, it's also very difficult to know what is going on at any time inside the Iranian regime because it's so opaque. But what, in your mind, is probably happening? You've discussed the options and they're limited, and interesting that, yes, the Supreme Leader just wants to say, I'm still here. But how do you think they are interpreting the contradictory or hazy rhetoric from Donald Trump?
I think the interpretive faculties of the Islamic Republic are fairly limited. I think they think that Israel is bent on their destruction, and they now think that Trump, having seemed to be wavering, having seemed to be interested in a negotiated solution, is now probably interested in their destruction. The Iranians have not played their hands well because they did have a period in time in which it looked as though Trump was keeping the Israelis off their back. However, what that would have required, we now think, we think is the case, is the abandonment of any uranium enrichment. And that for Ayatollah Khamenei is a declaration of not only of unconditional surrender, but it's also opening the door to regime change. And regime change is what he fears. And if it's going to happen, he would prefer to go down fighting than to surrender and see it happen that way.
Do you think there is any chance the regime could fall?
Well, we have to distinguish between regime change or regime fall or regime collapse and then regime change. Regime change, we know from our experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan, is something that is pre-planned. You have someone in place ready to drop into the seat of government. It goes horribly wrong because they've been dropped in by foreigners who have just invaded the country. Regime collapse is something that is precipitated by chaos on the streets, by chaos in the disruption to the provision of utilities, water, gas, fires everywhere. What Netanyahu has been fondly hoping is that his war against Iran would somehow bring the Iranian opposition and people who don't like the regime, and they are very, very numerous, out into the streets, into some kind of spontaneous revolt and uprising. And there have been other calls for the Iranian armed forces to mutiny particularly from the Crown Prince, as he thinks of himself, Reza Pahlavi, who would like to come back to Iran and become Shah. That these calls haven't actually led to anything demonstrates that when Iran is attacked, even a government as unpopular as the one that is happening now, that is in place now,
Yes.
people do not seek to exploit that situation. It's tainted with dishonor and treachery if you do that. So they're not rallying around the flag, but they're certainly not going to come out and topple it. And also they have other more pressing things to do. They've got people are trying to flee the big cities. They know that the cities are going to come under further attack. They're trying to find places to stay outside in other towns. People are opening their houses in spontaneous shows of solidarity, which are in fact very moving. There are many moving scenes going on in Iran at the moment that are completely unreported because of the mayhem. But behind that mayhem, there's a lot that's going on, and the people are not in the mood to launch a revolution. They're not in a state to launch a revolution.
No, and it's very interesting to hear you talk about people, because we focus so much, and rightly probably, on the regime and its leaders. But what do we get wrong about Iran? You've talked about how moving it is that people literally are welcoming strangers into their home as they flee the cities. We've seen those images of traffic as they try and leave Tehran. But how does the Iran you know differ from the standard portrayal?
Well, the Iranians at the moment, the people are caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, an unpopular regime, an oppressive regime, an unpleasant regime on the one hand, and then being rained on by bombs on the other. And these people have been through a great deal because they've been through wars and they've been through sanctions. And every time I go to Iran or I see someone who was recently in Iran, what is astonishing is the way that people's dignity, people's ability to see the good from the bad, their ability and their willingness to help each other remains completely undaunted. They also have an extraordinary sense of humor, a bleak sense of humor, but a fantastic sense of humor that you only need to look on your social media feed if you're a Persian reader, and you can see how people are jollying each other through this terrible, terrible time. And so there's a lot of humor. There's a lot of helping neighbors, helping strangers. And it's very tragic and it's very sad to see this tremendous civilization of 100 million people that has birthed so many of the great artistic achievements and architectural achievements and poetic achievements of the world, now reduced to a state that could, if things go really badly, could see it become another Iraq, another Afghanistan. The bad scenarios, I'm afraid, are many, and the good scenarios are difficult to pick out.
Well, that's the author and journalist Christopher de Bellaigue, and thank you so much for that fascinating insight into the people and life in Iran, aside from just the politics, war, and the supreme leader and the regime in charge.